Thank you everyone for joining us for another afternoon phenomenal breakout session. Our next session is going to be with MAURO ELDRITCH. He's an Argentine hacker and speaker. He found BCA and DC 5411, which is a DEF CON group. He has worked for government organizations such as the Ministry of Security, the Federal Reserve Administration, and more. As a speaker for some of the largest cybersecurity conferences out there, including RoadSecCon, DEF CON, Hacker Halted, for 2 years in a row. And we're just excited to have him speaking today on COVID-1984, propaganda and surveillance during a pandemic. Go ahead and take it away, MAURO.
Okay, thank you very much, Erin, for the introduction. Welcome everyone to my session. I'm going to present my slides now. Give me a second. Okay, we are ready. Welcome everyone to my talk, Propaganda and Surveillance During a Pandemic. My name is MAURO ELDRITCH, and I'm going to introduce myself briefly. Okay, I found the BCA, the DC 5411, and I spoke at different conferences around the world, including DEF CON a couple of times, and Hacker Halted for the 2nd year in a row. So I'm pretty happy to be here today. This talk it's divided in 2 sections. One is bigger than the other is mostly an annex, an appendix. These sections are propaganda and surveillance, both focusing on recent events which took place during the pandemic. The first section, the propaganda one, is about trolls. I'm pretty sure that you have heard this word a couple of times, specifically political trolls. We're going to talk about how their tactics works, how to identify their behavior, how to detect them based on their patterns, and how they turned social media into a troller, into a propaganda machine. This is something that became way more evident during the pandemic, where politicians had their reputations and the general approval from their peers and from their people really compromised. It hit them really hard. We will explain a real case of a pro-government propaganda apparatus, and we will do it from the inside. This is something that I haven't found quite a lot of research about, specifically from the inside. We'll use a sock puppet, which will be used to profile its most active elements, users, and its different propaganda operations that they carry on social media. We'll then analyze this information using our tool. It's our propaganda analysis framework, Venator. And then the surveillance appendix will cover something which I found to be pretty interesting, some privacy concerns and vulnerabilities from the government issue and mandatory COVID tracking application that became mandatory here in Argentina last year. So we will dissect this application. We will do some reverse engineering and see what is this about. As a legal disclaimer, all the information here was obtained via OSINT and by legit means. Reverse engineering and code analysis and all that kind of actions over an application is legal here. All the accounts that are displayed on the propaganda section are anonymized, and we are not directly or indirectly involved in any illegal activity. Okay, let's do a small introduction on trolls. The first thing that we have to know is, what is propaganda? Propaganda is a communication which is used primarily to influence an audience. It will obviously try to push an agenda, and this agenda may, and most of the time does, contain information which is not objective or it's plainly a lie. Obviously, when you have certain facts that are true, there might be selectively be presented, like cherry picking. What are trolls? Well, they are online political propaganda agents, and they will try to massively engage in commenting on social networks. Their comments will be either black or white. They will fully support you or fully despise you, or instead of you, a specific politician, a government, a company, or anything like that. They try to establish their own trends, both positives and negatives. Remember that they will fully support you or fully despise you. And they try to divert the focus from the opposition debates. This is mostly because trolls do not only attempt to install their trends, but also they want your voice not to be heard. They want to be the only speech available at any time on a specific media, in this case, social media. There are many ways to divert these opposition debates to derail them, which is basically leaving spam comments, fan cams, or anything that, when repeated a lot of times, might turn the thread to be almost impossible to read or to follow. So if you're a alleged commentator, someone who has alleged interest in this, you would have a hard time following this. So that's the main idea. How can you spot them? Well, it's pretty easy actually. Most of the times, specifically here we are talking on Twitter, you will find that a lot of them use default settings, like lacking a profile picture, using a fake or stock one, lots of number in their handler, because this is the default way that Twitter handles when you have a repeated username. For instance, if I want to log in or to register as MAURO, there are lots of MAUROs around. So I will get a handler like the one displayed here on this slide. My name followed by a bunch of numbers. They share common terms and phrases. They have like their own language, we can say. They will agree upon a common version to answer things or to attack things. So if you pay closer attention to what they said instead on how they engage, you will also find certain behaviors that will support this. And they will always come like a swarm. You will never see one of them alone because a single troll cannot install a trending topic, for example. So you will always see a bunch of them working together. So what is a propaganda apparatus? This is something that a lot of people may ask. It's the grouping of different propaganda agents in different media. And this is not only looked up on social media. This can be on different media. They will engage in coordinated effort to spread this misinformation or to spread a specific version on things. They will make coordinated efforts to report, block, or derail the opposition, as I commented before. And their interactions are quick and massive because these are the two main properties to a fabricated trend. You need to be quick and massive when interacting. If all of us started tweeting hashtag Halted now, we will make it become a trend really quick. And these apparatuses are composed of real people, bot accounts, and trolls. We will see the difference in a while. There are real cases which have been documented on different investigations. One that I always recommend is the Bloomberg one, which is focused on the Venezuelan propaganda apparatus. And lots of countries do have propaganda apparatuses working either officially or independently as contractors, as companies. Most of them you can be found as political social media marketing or something around those words. And why social media? Obviously, first of all, this will be absolutely cheap or free, and it's easy to automate and scale. You don't have to host any infrastructure. You don't have to host anything really fancy, and you have a greater reach. And you might say, okay, but social media shouldn't allow this. Well, we have cases where certain social media sites have a strong politic against propaganda, like Counter Social, where the countries with the highest propaganda incidents are absolutely banned, no matter what. All its entire IP block is banned. You can see some examples here. But then some other countries like mine had, this is no longer something existing, had a social media supporting propaganda, which was facepopular.net, which you may see that it's a spin-off, let's say, for not saying a rip-off, of a really popular social media site. This is an Argentine social network against the establishment and imperialism. And it's the supporter of the official Peronist party, where only its militants participated. And it was sponsored officially by the Ministry of Culture. So this is basically copyright infringement and a state-sponsored copyright infringement. This social network does no longer exist, but it did exist actually. And you may ask now, so this is pretty weird. Your country has a propaganda apparatus, which is also endorsed officially, and I want to invite you to take a look inside of it. So this leads us to the next section, tracking trolls. We'll analyze a real case, and this research started last year during the pandemic. And we will profile the K-troop or cyber case propaganda apparatus, which is Argentine, obviously. It's composed of real users, bots, which are mostly retweet bots or like bots, which you will find that the bot will only engage in retweeting a specific persons or specific hashtags. And trolls, usually fake accounts, which are only used for political things, for political operations. This apparatus is used to publicly retweet leaders and promote specific hashtags. And a lot of legit users on social media reported to have received invitations to join this apparatus. So we didn't want them to be left out of the party, so we created a Sock Puppet account and we tried to engage with them in order to get an invitation. So far, this is the result. We started by configuring this Sock Puppet account basically purely on the observations of these apparatus members' public profiles. So we try to imitate them as much as possible. We try to be similar to them as much as possible. Our profile photograph was President Fernandez and Vice President Fernandez together. The cover photograph was Vice President Fernandez giving a speech. And we started following the president, ministers, and a few pro-government accounts that were run by real people, mostly journalists. And here is when things became a little bit harder. We tried to imitate their own specific language and symbolism, mostly emojis, used by these users. Now the how is the right question here. We are not linguists, we are not people specialized in psychology or anything like that, so we have to mimic them with our only toolset. We only have hacker tools, which was some Ruby scripts and some APIs, so we have to do that way. So we used the Twitter API, we extracted their most recent tweets and started to monitor their hashtags and tweets and extracting the most repeated words, forming a cloud. I know that since this is Argentine, this word cloud is mostly on Spanish, but all these terms that you find here are most of them focused as pejorative terms for the opposition. So we try to start using these words as much as possible every time we engage it. And so far, so good. It went really good, actually. We have a little bit more than 100 followers on the first hours of activity. And we received our invitation 3 days after. Again, the message is in Spanish, but the best parts are translated, the most important ones. Somebody approached us, somebody with a lot of followers, and told us, hey, buddy, we're making Twitter groups to install hashtags. Do you want to join? And obviously, we wanted to. So I say, yeah, sure. What am I supposed to do? Basically, you have to tweet the hashtags that we sent to the group. And I was added to a group number 300 and something of soldiers of the national project containing 50 people. And then on that group, some briefings were shared here as pictures, as you can see the green one here in the chat, and then the hashtag which was proposed to attack that day, to use that day and to try to install that day. Guys, Ariel Garbars is asking us to use Larreta is responsible. In previous years, in the first chapter of this research, we explained that Ariel Garbars has a company which engage in this kind of activity, in this kind of operations, which are labeled as political marketing on social media and, you know, different kinds of brandings for the same things, basically political trolling. So Larreta is the mayor of Buenos Aires City and a member of the opposition. So they are, I can't remember exactly why, but they are saying that he's responsible of something. And every day they propose 2 hashtags at least. The first one was Pescado Podrido M, and the second one, Larreta is responsible. Both these hashtags made it to the trended topics, to the top 5. And as you can see, this has its date and time. It has its timestamp, and you can verify this on Get Date Trends. And if you go to Trendinalia, which is another another source of intelligence, you can find that these both hashtags lasted for more than 12 hours, which gives you a tip of how toxic they are. They are really toxic. They can install a hashtag and make it last for 12 hours straight. Then, some days after, somebody says, with Ariel Garbars, this leader of this apparatus, we formed a group where he's administrator and tells us what to publish and at what time, so we can get our trend to be always on first place. So that's basically the idea. Then again, some more slogans are shared here, some more briefings, and a link to a WhatsApp chat. So as you can see here on the picture on the left, we are members of two different groups. This is because 10 days after we have joined this group, another person tells us, hey, do you want to join our hashtags groups? And I said, yeah, okay. And then when we were checking the profile, it was the very same recruiter we have that had invited us before, but with another account. As you can see, it ends here with Q86 and here with P86. And we were introduced to two different propaganda groups. Now, let's make some numbers here. Let's do the math. If each one of these groups holds 50 users, we have to extract the administrator, which is always the same. And we have found around 400 propaganda groups. If we multiply them, we have that, even counting repeated users, we have almost 20,000 users dedicated to political trolling. Remember, there may be repeated. For example, we were one of the repeated users. Now, remember that a WhatsApp link was shared here? We have joined those WhatsApp groups too. And first of all, look at the first person sending a message here, Ariel Garbars, once again. Now, we can say, because this is the group number 7, that at least we have 7 WhatsApp groups of 256 users each. Again, we have to extract the administrator, which give us around 2,000 users, some less. Now, if we add up the Twitter users and the WhatsApp groupers, which again may contain, really probably will contain repeated users, we have more than 20,000 users dedicated only to spreading malicious propaganda. Now, let's take a look at this upper part here, where you have the numbers. Look at the country codes. Obviously, we won't display the full numbers or the full list. It's not inside the scope of this. But something worth mentioning is that we have found country codes from Argentina, obviously, Germany, Spain, Saudi Arabia, and USA. This was quite odd for us, quite odd, actually. Now, try to picture how are you going to stop or to fight back or to blog or to whatever against 20,000 users which daily engage in propaganda operations. So, summarizing, we have 100 followers on the first hour of tweeting using that word list, that cloud. We have received our invitation after 3 days. And obviously, the first obvious result is that we gained access to group chats. So we had early access to the trends. But we also have access to higher ranking profiles that were not involved in Twitter. They were not tweeting about those hashtags. They were only coordinating the operations. So that was a really important piece of intelligence to craft how this propaganda apparatus is composed and how its hierarchy works. So now it's time to fit this data into our tool in order to showcase this on a better organized way. So let's jump to it. Venator is a small tool that we have built, a small framework, in order to analyze different properties of a Twitter profile in order to see if it's engaging in bot-like or troll-like behavior. So far, we used it to profile different campaigns in Uruguay, Argentina, and Mexico. And we are planning to start profiling different campaigns around Latin America. And I know that this work started last year, but these trends analyzed here belong to 3 campaigns that took place just a couple of days ago, or actually a month ago in August. There are 3 hashtags, which I want to make a clarification here. I do not, nor me or my team, support any of these hashtags, and also we do not support the attacked part. We do not support the other party that is being attacked. So this doesn't have a political connotation. We only want to make this on the most mathematical and logical way possible, on the most exact way possible. This is not about politics. This is something that it's bad when either side does it. When either side engages in this is foul play. It doesn't matter who starts it first or who continues it. So back on track, we are going to analyze 3 hashtags. Iglesias misogynist, which is a deputy from the opposition, the fugitive and the stranded, and pro smugglers. Pro is one of the opposition parties, and they are accusing them of being smugglers. So we profiled the first 70 accounts to engage with each one of them. So let's take a look at the first trend. Give me a second. Remember that you can normalize this data to see that this makes a sort of a plateau. So you can see that it starts growing up really quick. It keeps going on. Remember that these trends, these fabricated trends, are highly toxic. It remains on top for a while, for a couple of hours, and then it falls somewhat dramatically. This was approved for us to start investigating it because a lot of their trends are bait and switch. Take a look at the second one. It lasted for almost nothing. It just pick up and fall, like somebody not only controlled the rise of this fabricated trend, but also its fall. Now, take a look at the third one, which I tried to do a little bit more of zoom here. You may say, okay, Mauro, this one is a plateau too. No. What if you, and those who have befriended the statistics may help me a little bit here. If you normalize this, if you try to normalize this peak, you will see that it actually tends more to be a peak instead of a plateau. So this started again, growing up dramatically. If you normalize it, it almost didn't get a lot of time online, and it fell again. But nevertheless, we have introduced all these trends, among with other trends from these users in our tool. Iglesias misogynist got almost 2,000 prints. Remember that we are triaging 70 accounts only. The second one, pro smugglers, got only 60, but the fugitive and the stranded got only 21. So this is quite odd. Let's keep on. Now we're going to analyze Iglesias misogynist. Take a look at this one. The count, this is the number of times that somebody tweeted that hashtag, a specific user. The top distributor tweeted this 136 times. I know that you may be, I don't know, angry or don't like this deputy or be against him, but 136 times is quite a lot in 2 hours. The second one did it 98 times. You really hate that guy so much? 96, 84, 84, 82, 77, 75, 74, 73, 72, 64, 62. That's quite a lot of hate there. And I'm not actually a fan of this guy, but really, 136 times? Then we try to profile these people, say, okay, why have you tweeted this so many times? The top distributor, much to our surprise, doesn't look like a legit account. Now, let's make a small rewind here. Remember how to spot the trolls. Default settings, default pictures, lots of numbers in handler, common terms and phrases, common versions to answers or to attack debates, and swarm behavior. Remember that. Let's keep on moving. This is the top distributor. I have redacted the name because we don't care here about pointing fingers. Highly suspicious behavior detected. This picture, in case you don't understand it, this is the Vice President Fernandez and the Argentine flag on the back. So the account is old enough to not to be considered something bad, but it has a little bit more followed people than followers. That doesn't rise the score so much high, actually. The account has little activity because it means that when you try to summarize the activity on each day, this account doesn't have quite a lot of activity. And it's used mostly to tweet these hashtags 176 times. It follows a blacklisted user, Ariel Garbars. It has low activity, it's rather dangerous, and has malicious hashtags engaged. The second one, as you can see in this picture, if you don't know, this person is Diego Maradona and a soccer player, and this is not Diego Maradona's official profile, so this is quite odd too. The account is old. It has a little bit more followers than followers. It has an outstanding activity. What does this mean? 77,000 tweets. This means that this account doesn't tweet every day or on a standard way. It will do not tweet for a week, and then on next Monday, it will tweet 70 times. That's outstanding activity. This is used mostly during operations. And take a look. It treated Iglesias misogynist, and this may be the same, this one seems the same, but actually in Spanish we have characters with tilde. So this is why this seems different. Again, outstanding activity, seems suspectful, and have malicious hashtags, has engaged with malicious hashtags. Again, this other profile is, again, Vice President Fernandez, and this is not her account. Again, let's take a look at the hashtags directly. Again, this one which is blacklisted. And then we have suspectful handler. This means that it had a lot of numbers in the handler, outstanding activity, malicious hashtags, and recently created. Again, this is Vice President Fernandez once again. And you can see here, the account is really old, 11 years old, and it has outstanding activity. During these 11 years, it has remained inactive. And then it makes a burst of different tweets, like 100 or so, and then stops again. And sorry, I forgot to mention this one. It uses the default pictures, which were seen like default Twitter banner or profile picture. In this case, it's the banner. And then we have the master of camouflage here, which didn't actually like it, its job, and say this job of being a troll is quite hard. Let's try to do the minimal required to get my paycheck. And now, before jumping into our next section, I want you to take a look at this once again. These trolls, these fabricated trends, lacking profile pictures, some sort of stock pictures. And now tell me again how much you trust information on social media. I have a small appendix to share with you today, which is Airgob Coronavirus APK. This application, before we start, I want to say that it was made mandatory by the government. So if you wanted to leave the threshold of your house, if you wanted to cross the street door from your house to the street, you have to carry a smartphone. In a country with almost 45% of people living in poverty, you will require a smartphone. So all your permits were stored on that application. This application started as something mandatory, which you could use in order to get diagnosis, to get diagnosed by yourself, and to request medical attention, and to request permission to leave your house. The first thing we got here when we started dismantling, when we tried to do reverse engineering here, was that a lot of variable names and procedure names and function names were named like in a dyslexic way. For example, here it says bonotes, which doesn't mean anything in Spanish. The right word is botones, buttons. Now, número doesn't mean anything. Número means number. Again, a lot of the functions we found later that were absolutely broken because of this. When you try to do certain functions, and this is something that we discovered in a bit I will show, the application crashed. You were left out again. Masculio means nothing, but masculino, with an N here, means male. So that's a really bad start, actually. Then the first function that we found that was broken was the auto-diagnosis, auto-evaluation. You have to put your symptoms, and you could do an auto-evaluation. Evaluation in Spanish, it's rather similar to the English word. Instead of evaluation, it's evaluación, but here it says evaluacoin. So that's why when you try to do the auto-evaluation, the application crashed. Then we found that a lot of times JSON strings were built this way, which is rather really buggy. We didn't, we don't condone using this actually. So we started using in MoneyWeb Scanner, Austin Labs, and some other scanners in order to analyze the fully compiled APK. While we were also diving into the source code, we found that do not take into account these 3 lines because this is where the scanner resides. We found that all the information was sent abroad to USA servers, which had a C final security grade, which is really dangerous. This doesn't pass even half of the HIPAA protocols checkpoints. So that's something really odd. We started trying to dive deep into the architecture, and we found that all of these different components of the architecture receive the same final grade, C. As you can see, it doesn't comply with GDPR, with PCI, or with whatever. If it doesn't comply with anything of this, what can you expect from HIPAA, for example, which is the protocol for healthcare applications? Now, another thing that we detected is that all the interactions with both the API or made from the APK to different sites didn't have any security headers, any. Also, there are a lot of privacy concerns here which weren't actually really clear to us because not all parts of the code are actually understandable. It took the government like 6 months to publish from this research on. Like 6 months later, they published the source code for the iPhone version. So we found that it made a lot of write operations, and this one particularly got our eyes. When pasting it through a decoder, we found that it records device ID and identifiable information, which might not seem like a big deal now, but you will see in a few slides that it really is, because everything starts with something little like this, with a small string, with a small identifier. But then we'll be moving to more darker things. From the start, this application tried to use a tracking location all the time. I will translate it for you from Spanish. Permiso de ubicación means location permission, without permission, all the times, and only with the application visible, or never. But todo el tiempo, all the time, was the default setting. And it tried to force actualizations, to force updates. Look here, it says forced update, and then this receiver, this arranque de dispositivo means device boot up or device boot. So on boot, it will try to force the upgrade. And then remember that we are dealing with identifiable information on C security grade servers. The application asked for different diseases that you might have in the past or presently, or your parents might have too, because some might be inherited. Cancer, diabetes, pregnancy, cardiac, hepatic, renal, respiratory diseases, which are all pieces of information which will be stored abroad on C security grade servers. And then the auto-evaluation results will be sent even if you didn't want to. They are not stored at client side, they are stored at server side. So if you do an auto-evaluation to see if you're well, it will be sent. And it will be sent in this snippet here, usuario.dni, it's our national ID document. So it will send your DNI, your unique identification number, with your results to a server on a C-grade server, right? On a C-grade server. And then, todo el tiempo, once again, if you have the tracking location activated, which is the default setting, it will start a foreground service to send periodically your location. Then, one of the most dangerous functions that I found here is you are not contagious. It is not okay for an application to diagnose something. It isn't, it's even worse to tell somebody that he's fine. You're fine, no problem, you're not sick. That's way worse. So let's do a small experiment here. Next time you have a symptom, a medical symptom, and say, oh, my knee hurts, try Googling it. Put it on Google. What will Google say? I can give you a preview of what could Google say. Google will say that you're basically going to die, period. You say, but I just have a small bruise here, you're going to die, period. So before we left, this is not the first time we do something like that at government level here. This is the application that the Argentine government forces people to download when they land on Argentina to control the COVID infections. This was featured in subreddit Programming Horror, and it's not the only example. This opened a thread of a lots of examples from the Argentina government. And as you can see on this giantly nested if, this is not something good at all. So take another look at this. Secret servers, all the time locations, you're not contagious. Now tell me again how much you trust the government handling medical information, and specifically your medical information.